Good morning. On Thursday, November the 24th, 2022, Sunshine Marie Foy, date of birth October the 1st, 1980, of Gloucester in Carteret County, North Carolina, was shot and killed by a deputy with the Onslow County Sheriff's Office. This incident occurred on Thanksgiving Day at the residence of 210 Willow Street in Hubert, North Carolina. After reviewing the investigation of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, I have determined that Foy's death, while tragic due to loss of life, was justified because Foy's actions caused the deputy of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office to reasonably believe it necessary to use deadly force to protect his life and the lives of others at the scene. The evidence shows that only one deputy fired his weapon. The investigation showed that on November 24, 2022, at approximately 11:34 a.m., a deputy of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office initiated a traffic stop on a truck for expired registration. The truck was a 1987 Chevrolet V10 registered to an individual in Hubert, North Carolina. The deputy activated his blue lights on his marked patrol vehicle, and the truck continued traveling Highway 172, turning right onto Willow Street in Hubert. The truck stopped. The passenger, later identified as Sunshine Marie Foy, who's the decedent, exited the vehicle and ran down Willow Street. Two males remained inside the truck. The deputy observed Foy opening a black book bag and looking for something as she was running. Approximately 2 minutes later, other deputies arrived with a K9 and began tracking Foy. A deputy remained at the truck with the two males. The driver of the truck was cited for expired registration and driver's license revoked. As the deputy cited the driver of the truck, he then heard 4 shots fired. This was approximately 11:55 a.m. when the shots were fired. A neighbor indicated that a female neighbor advised deputies that the decedent, later identified as Foy, went into a single-wide trailer and residence located at 210 Willow Street. Foy knocked on the door of 210 Willow Street, and the resident let Foy in. The resident did not know Foy. Foy told the resident she was running from the sheriff's office. She asked where she could go, and the resident pointed to a front bedroom. She entered the bedroom at that time. The bedroom is located to the right of the living room as you enter the trailer. The deputies were all wearing Onslow County Sheriff's Office tan shirts, olive green, drab green pants, and duty belts. The tan shirts had Onslow County Sheriff's Office patches on the sleeves. The patrol vehicles were marked. The deputies had Onslow County Sheriff's Office badges on their left chest and name tags on the right chest. The deputy identified themselves to Foy numerous times that they were law enforcement with the Sheriff's Office. On November 30th, 2022, the deputy who fired his weapon made a statement to the Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Rayner, at the SBI. The deputy was represented by counsel, and his counsel was present. The deputy was read, and he waived his Miranda rights at 10:08 a.m. on November 30th, 2022. And this is the statement he made. The deputy indicated that who fired the shots announced that he was with the sheriff's office at the end of the trailer. 2 deputies entered the trailer at the front door. One of the deputies who entered the residence had his K9 with him. One other deputy was by the back door of the trailer. The deputy who fired his weapon entered the front bedroom. This bedroom, again, is to the right of the living room. The room was dark or low light conditions. This deputy used his flashlight to search for Foy. He observed Foy hiding behind some clothing that were hanging from a shelf. We had photographs of this room. There was a lot of items in that room, personal items, clothing, just a lot of things in the room. He could see the outline of a person behind the clothing. Using his hand, he moved the clothes away from Foy. At that time, Foy pulled a silver handgun and pointed at him. The deputy was approximately 1 foot from Foy. She had the gun in her right hand and pointed the gun at his face. She pulled the trigger. The gun did not go off. He heard the other deputy standing at the entrance of the bedroom yell, "Gun!" After she pulled her gun, the deputy stepped back and tried to get cover behind a piece of furniture. He told her to drop the gun as he was drawing his own weapon in his right hand. He did not draw his weapon until he saw her pointing the gun at him first. At that time, the deputy's gun had 17 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, so a total of 18 rounds. She pulled her weapon back a second time and attempted to fire again. Her gun did not fire. The deputy attempted to fire his gun, but either it jammed or there was a misfire. The deputy threw down his flashlight, and using his training, he used his left hand to try to rack the slide back to clear the weapon as you're trained to do. He was trying to clear the malfunction. Foy raised her gun up to the deputy's face a third time, and the deputy stated he fired 5 to 6 shots at Foy. He said he thought he shot 6 times, but one of those could have been a misfire. The deputy observed gunshot wounds about the person of Foy, and he called for emergency medical service, or EMS. Foy never fired her gun. There was no body camera video to review. The other deputy inside the trailer made a statement to the SBI on November 24th, approximately 2 hours after the shooting. He said the deputy who fired his weapon entered the bedroom, and the deputy yelled, "Drop the gun, drop the gun." He saw Foy aim her gun at the other deputy. The other deputy then fired his weapon. But again, only one deputy fired their weapon. That was the one actually within about a foot or two of Foy. He estimated he was about 10 feet from the other deputy entrance of the bedroom when this happened. He said he heard 4 or 5 shots, and the shots were consecutive. He thought the distance between Foy and the deputy who fired his weapon was approximately 1 to 2 feet. The deputy who was involved in the traffic stop was still at the truck. He immediately got on the radio and said, "I heard shots fired." This deputy then proceeded to the scene of the trailer with his first aid kit. The deputy with his first aid kit met the deputy who fired his weapon. And the deputy told him, "She put a gun in my face and almost shot me." Deputies attempted life-saving measures on Foy until EMS arrived. A total of 4 deputies were at the scene with Foy at the time, including the deputy who shot Foy. EMS was notified at 11:55 a.m. and EMS dispatched to the scene at approximately 11:57 a.m. EMS arrived on scene at 12 p.m. At approximately 12:31 p.m., EMS began transport of Foy to Camp Lejeune Hospital, a trauma center. EMS arrived at the emergency room at Camp Lejeune Naval Hospital at 12:42 p.m. EMS determined that Foy was unresponsive, not breathing, and had no pulse. She was pronounced dead at the Naval Hospital. The firearm of the deputy who shot Foy was recovered at the scene by a lieutenant with the Onslow County Sheriff's Office and turned over to the SBI on November 24th, the date of the shooting. The firearm was identified as an Onslow County Sheriff's Office issued Glock model 45 9mm handgun. The deputy indicated to the SBI the firearm earlier that they had 1 round in the chamber and 17 rounds in the magazine, for again a total of 18 rounds. At the trailer inside the bedroom, the SBI located a flashlight and a black in color backpack on the floor, matching the description of the backpack Foy had in her possession. She fled the sheriff's office. The flashlight was consistent with the one the deputy said he was using to try to locate Foy. Inside the backpack was a brass in color Luger 9mm bullet and other personal belongings of Foy. We were able to identify her from those personal belongings. The SBI also recovered a silver in color 9mm Jimenez Arms Inc. handgun with an identifiable serial number. This was the gun that Foy had. This handgun was photographed on the top of a pile of clothes in the corner of the bedroom. The handgun was loaded with 3 rounds in the magazine and 1 round in the chamber. So she had a total of 4 rounds in her gun. The SBI noted blood and human tissue on the handgun. There is no evidence that Foy fired her gun. Inside the bedroom of the trailer, the SBI recovered 3 Winchester 9mm Luger shell cases and 2 live rounds on the floor. A fire projectile was recovered in the backyard of the trailer by the SBI. 2 fired projectiles were recovered on the floor of the bedroom. A total of 3 fire projectiles were recovered. 1 was not recovered. I've looked at the photograph, so there are holes in the trailer. So probably one of those bullets just exited the trailer, just not been able to be recovered. On November 25th, 2022, the operator of the truck returned to the residence where the shooting occurred. He located a shell casing that he turned over to the SBI on November 30th. So a total of 4 Winchester 9mm Luger shell casings were located in the trailer from the bedroom. That would be consistent with 4 shots being fired by the deputy. The evidence shows that the deputy's firearm had a total of 18 rounds prior to the shooting, which included 17 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. After the shooting, the deputy's firearm had a total of 12 rounds, which included 11 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. This is consistent with 4 shell casings and 2 live rounds found at the scene that were ejected from the deputy's firearm when the deputy racked the slide back to clear the malfunction. So all the bullets are accounted for, or at least all the casings and number of fired shots. The driver of the truck that was stopped by law enforcement November 24th was interviewed by the SBI. The driver of the truck said on November 24th, 2022, he was with Foy at his residence. He and Foy left together. They drove to the Scotchman store on Highway 172 in Hubert. The driver of the truck saw a deputy enter the Scotchman store. He did not interact with the deputy. He observed the deputy leave the Scotchman and park his marked patrol vehicle across the street. The 3 left the store in his truck. The driver of the truck observed the deputy pull up behind him with his blue lights activated. After the truck stopped, the driver of the truck observed Foy jump across the passenger and exit the truck. She was wearing a black backpack. The driver of the truck heard a deputy yell to Foy to stop running. The driver of the truck and the male passenger were detained by the Onslow County Sheriff's Office. The driver of the truck was cited for, like I said, for driving while license revoked and expired registration. The driver of the truck also heard 4 to 5 rapid gunshots. The driver of the truck and the male passenger left the scene. And then he returned on November 24th, 2022 and observed law enforcement and emergency personnel at the scene. I became involved in this case on November 24th, 2022 at about 12:39 p.m. I received a text from Senior Assistant Attorney Kelly Neal that Colonel and Sheriff-elect Chris Thomas had called about an officer-involved shooting in Hubert, North Carolina. I was in fact out of county at the time. I was in Watauga County up in Boone, North Carolina with my family for Thanksgiving. At that time, Colonel and Sheriff-elect Chris Thomas requested the SBI investigate the shooting. On Thanksgiving Day at 2:57 p.m., I was on the phone with the SBI about this case and updated on the investigation. I joined with the Colonel and the Sheriff-elect Chris Thomas and requested the SBI to investigate. On November 28, 2022, I sent a formal request by letter to the SBI requesting the SBI investigate this shooting. On December 2nd, December 7th, January 9th, February 1st through 2nd, I was in contact with Special Agent Rayner. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone with him again this morning. On February 2nd, I was in contact with the crime scene of the SBI. On January 10th, 2023, I received the initial report from the SBI in this case. On January 12th, I assigned Assistant District Attorney Chris Abrams, who's standing to my right, to assist me in this investigation. Either together or separately, we worked on this case or met with individuals or read through reports on January 17th through the 19th, 2023, January 21st, January 31st, and February 1st to the 3rd of 2023. On February 1st, I requested and received the EMS reports. On February 2nd, 2023, I received and requested the SBI crime scene report and photographs of the scene. We reviewed all the SBI documents in the case. We reviewed the EMS documents and records. We reviewed the photographs. We reviewed the statements of witnesses. 10 people were interviewed by the SBI. We reviewed each one of those. On December the 8th, 2022, I had contact with Dr. Pestner. Dr. Pestner performed the autopsy. Dr. Joseph Pestner is a pathologist at the Brody School of Medicine at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. Chris Abrams and I spoke to him on that date. He indicated that on February 1st, 2023, by telephone call, that the autopsy showed 3 gunshot wounds and a possible laceration of the fingers on the left hand of Foy that is consistent with a gunshot wound. The wound numbers are not reflective of the order in which they were fired. They simply just have to assign some numbers so we can keep track of them. So number 1 that we have marked as gunshot wound number 1 was to the left side of the face. Entered the left jaw, through her right jaw, and exited her upper neck. This was not recovered from the decedent. The projectile was a through and through. But fragments were located in the wound. This gunshot wound number 2 was to the left side of the chest that entered both lungs and her heart. This projectile was also not recovered. from the decedent. It was a through-and-through wound. Gunshot wound number 3 entered her right chest, injured a lung, and exited the right side of her back. This was also not recovered, although fragments were recovered. Gunshot wound number 4 is a laceration of her left hand between the ring and little fingers. This wound was consistent with a gunshot wound, but no projectile or fragment was located. Dr. Pestner noted no stippling or soot on the wounds. No projectiles were recovered at the autopsy. Dr. Pestner stated the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, but the wound to the heart would have been fatal. We also ran a record check on Foy, which trying to find out possibly why she ran from the law enforcement that day. She's had a record since 1997 in Onslow County, New Hanover County. She's had numerous offenses, including financial transaction card fraud, simple possession of marijuana, common law forgery, false pretenses, financial card theft, felonious speeding to elude arrest. Her last conviction in Onslow County was in 2019. At the time of the shooting, she had pending charges, drug charges over in Carteret County, including possession of heroin. That was and an order for arrest was issued in that case for her failure to appear in Carteret County. That order for arrest was issued November 17, 2022. I find that that the deputy who fired the fatal shots indicated that Foy pointed her gun at his face at close range. He fired his weapon at her 4 times. After being shot and incapacitated by the deputy, she ceased to be a threat to the deputy. The shooting death of Foy is found to be justified to protect the safety and lives of law enforcement at the scene. The general rules of self-defense in the state of North Carolina and the defense of others permit you to use deadly force to protect yourself when you honestly believe that you're in fear of death or great bodily injury. And this belief is reasonable. I find that the deputy did so find and that his belief was reasonable. Also, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 14-34.5, it is a Class E felony to assault a law enforcement officer with a firearm. And pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 14-415.1 is a Class G felony for a convicted felon to possess a firearm. She, in fact, was a convicted felon and possessed a firearm. In all likelihood, at the time she jumped from the vehicle, she, of course, knew that she was wanted over in Carteret County. She ran from law enforcement. She also knew that she had a firearm in her possession that she should not have. It was unlawful to possess. That's the reason I believe she ran from law enforcement. I put a lot of law in there, just like I did on my last officer-involved shooting. I'm going to go through everything, but I can tell you that 15A-401D2, a law enforcement officer is justified in using deadly physical force upon another person to defend himself or a third person from what he reasonably believes to be the use of imminent use of deadly physical force. I find that the deputy reasonably believed that he was going to be shot by this individual when she pulled the gun on him and pulled the trigger the number of times that she did. There is evidence that the 4 shots were fired in rapid succession at the scene by one law enforcement officer. She was struck 3 times with a possible abrasion wound on her hand. There is no evidence that I find that the number of shots fired by the deputy was excessive. Even if there were an excessive number of shots fired, the question is whether the perceived threat has been neutralized for the safety of the law enforcement officer firing his weapon, as well as another law enforcement area in the immediate area. In other words, you are allowed to neutralize the threat. Based upon my review of the facts of this case, I've determined the shooting of Foy on November 24, 2022 was justified to protect the life of this deputy and another deputy at the scene. He perceived an apparent threat, which was an actual threat, and acted. There is insufficient evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to show that the deputy who fired the fatal shots acted in any manner that was inconsistent with his perception of an apparent threat. There is no evidence that the deputy acted in any way contrary or in violation of North Carolina law. I appreciate the investigation by Assistant Special Agent in Charge P. Rayner and Special Agent L. Bullard of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. There were also other agents involved from as far away as Fayetteville that day. I appreciate the cooperation of Sheriff Hans Miller, Sheriff Chris Thomas, who's present today, and the Onslow County Sheriff's Office. I have determined that the shooting death of Sunshine Marie Foy is justified, and no criminal charges against the officer involved in this matter are warranted under the law and under the circumstances revealed by the independent SBI investigation. I do have some photographs I can show you. I'll leave that on the table. This is a picture of the trailer that was entered by law enforcement that day. As you enter the trailer in the front door, if you look to your right, you enter into a living room, you look to your right, there is a bedroom. This is the living room area. This is the living room looking off into the bedroom to the right. You can see the bedroom over here where there's a mattress and a bed. This is inside the bedroom itself. There was a lot of things inside that bedroom, including a lot of clothes. The clothes, of course, had been moved by that time because they were trying to assist her. But at the time the deputy entered, there were clothes hanging from a shelf, and she was trying to hide behind those clothes. This is another photograph of the bedroom showing in the area which she was shot. There was a large pile of clothes near where she was shot. This is a bullet that was a live round that was found in her backpack by the State Bureau of Investigation. And this is the weapon that Sunshine Foy had in her possession on this date. And it had 4 rounds in it, 3 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Y'all have any questions?
Mr. Lee, were you able to determine who owned the gun that was in possession of Ms. Foy?
I do not know that. I do not. But it did have an identifiable serial number, but I do not know who the owner was. I have not got that information back from ATFE.
The deputy that was involved in the shooting was placed on administrative leave. Has that deputy since been reinstated to Onslow County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, and I've got the sheriff here too. He can address that.
Yes. How many years of law enforcement did that deputy have?
Oh gosh, it was quite a few years. I'll let the sheriff.
He had 6.5 years law enforcement. Well, had 6.5 years law enforcement. The other deputy was president had over 10 years.
I'm sorry.
Over 10 years for the other deputy.
The other deputy was over 10.
Any other questions?
What was the fact that she went to that particular dwelling on Willow Street just random? Or was there a connection there?
You know, Mike, that's one of those questions we had. It does appear just to be random. From all the evidence that we got, the resident of that address did not know this lady. But nonetheless, he let her inside the residence and actually pointed to where she could go. But he did not know her.
And the 2 gentlemen in the vehicle at the Scotchman prior to the incident, was there a long-standing relationship between Ms. Foy and those 2 gentlemen, or was that just a quick?
Well, initially, the operator indicated that the vehicle said he did not know Ms. Foy, but then he subsequently said that she had been at his residence earlier that day. As to the second person, we do not know what the relationship was with Ms. Foy.
Was Ms. Foy employed?
Not at this time.
So she was unemployed,
Unemployed.
living down east.
Yeah. What I know about Ms. Foy is I've spoken to her brother. I've spoken to an aunt who's in South Carolina, and she has a niece over in Morehead City, and I've been told that she has 4 children, 2 of which are adults.
So the one that shot the window was working, you said, Sheriff, 6 years?
6.5 years.
And he's back fully working?
Any other questions? Okay. I appreciate y'all coming this morning. And this is the second time we've done this in, about 2.5 weeks. So this is my 13th officer-involved shooting as the elected district attorney, which now is averaging a little bit more than 1 year. So, but I appreciate y'all being here, and I just hope that law enforcement is able to remain safe out there. We have a lot of people out there with firearms, a lot of people out there that want to do harm to law enforcement.
I did actually have one question.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of more catered towards Sheriff Thomas.
Okay.
And it was just really pertaining to the, I guess the split-second decisions and the dangers of this kind of scenario. A lot of times, the conversation doesn't always get brought up how much, you know what I'm saying, that there's not a lot of time to think about what you're doing and how you're reacting in these scenarios. Just wanted to kind of speak to the danger of that situation, that's all.
Well, I mean, the events he described, transpired in a matter of probably less than 10 seconds, I would think. So you have to make a split-second decision to evaluate what's going on, evaluate the threat. And I feel like the deputies responded appropriately. It's a tragic event, but they acted appropriately.
These officers, look, they get these scenes, they've got to make split-second decisions. I mean, their life is basically, Foy could have shot him. That's basically it. If her gun had fired, she could have shot this deputy. It's not to say the other deputy would not have shot her first. We'll never know. But this deputy is only a foot from her at this time, and she puts her gun up to his face. So these deputies have to basically make split-second decisions in high-pressure situations, and yet this officer reacted in a way he did based upon his training. In fact, even when his gun misfired, I mean, he didn't panic. He did what you're supposed to. He dropped his flashlight, started racking it back as you're taught to do to clear the rounds. He cleared 2, and then he was able to pull the trigger on his gun. He's very fortunate, frankly. Both deputies are very fortunate because she had 4 bullets inside that gun. There were 2 deputies there.
Mr. Lee or Sheriff Thomas, you mentioned in the report here, there was no body camera videos to review. Was the deputy wearing a body camera that was not activated or did not have it on the person?
None of them had were equipped at that time. So no body cameras on scene.
Any other questions? The public would probably ask who were the deputies involved in the shooting. Is your office or your office prepared to release the names of the deputies?
No, sir. I'm not going to divulge the name of the deputy. Look, my policy is unless they've already been previously released by law enforcement, I do not release the names of the deputies unless they are charged. And I do that for officer safety. These deputies are still patrolling here at Onslow County, and I've got to watch out for their safety. And I really don't see where it serves a real purpose for the public to know who they are. The deputies did their jobs. Any other questions?
I will add, we did an internal affairs investigation as well. There were no policy violations. The deputies did, like the district attorney said, they did as they were trained. And it's tragic, but at least they're safe.
Okay, I appreciate y'all coming today. And hopefully we won't have any more of these, but if so, I will see you in the future. Best of y'all. Take care. Everybody be safe.